So we're going to go through fiscal policy today. That's going to be our focus for today's lesson. So what is fiscal policy? So I'll ask Malika, what is fiscal policy?
Um, it's where, sorry, I don't really know. I guess it has to do with the changes in like government tax or something like that.
Yes, that's the first half of it. That's great. So yeah, it deals with government tax. That's one half of it. So it is the taxes that the government charges and government spending. So it's both of those things. So taxes and spending by the government. So that's what fiscal policy is, and then it gets more complicated as we go. That's the basis of what it is. So it is the use of government taxing and spending powers to manage the behavior of the economy. So they usually use it as a reaction, usually as a reactionary measure. They use it. So recessions, they increase government spending and reduce taxes to increase economic growth during recessions. And then expansions, they reduce government spending and increase taxes to reduce inflation during expansions. So like inflation starts to become a problem during expansionary periods. So as we saw in 2022, this became a problem and inflation had to be reduced through reducing government spending and increasing taxes in some cases. So they did some of that to reduce inflation during 2022, and because prices were way too high for consumers, so they needed to reduce the price increases. So the Department of Finance does this for the economy. So they want to ensure a healthy Canadian economy by developing policies of sound economic management and providing expert advice to the government. So they want to ensure that the economy is growing. So their whole the Department of Finance is focused on growing the economy with steady inflation. So like 2% inflation and and uh, and and economic growth that is high and sustainable. So that's really their goal. So that they don't want prices to be increasing by very high levels. They want prices to be predictable and affordable for consumers. So affordability is a big concern of their agenda. So affordability is one of the key points of their agenda. So that's very key. Affordability is really key to their agenda. And yeah, I'll send this over in the chat for everyone. So the Minister of Finance proposed an annual budget in the Parliament each spring, so it's coming very soon. And they present how much spending there will be, how much taxes there will be, and the programs that will be in the spending. And it's now submitted to the government's revenues and expenditures. So stabilization policies. So stabilization policy is focused on a government policy that lessens the ups and downs of the business cycle. They want stabilization policies that will keep inflation at 2% and keep unemployment low. So they want this to keep affordability and also allow for people to get work. So affordability and employment are two of their key objectives. So that's very important to them, affordability and employment. So that's really what they're looking for, and everything they do is based on mostly those objectives, and also income growth, like wage growth is very important to them also. So like those three are some of their key points. So wage growth, affordability, employment, and wage equality also. So like those are the core focuses of the Ministry of the Department of Finance. So that's very key for their department. They want to ensure everyone's working, they get wage growth, they allow for affordability, and also wage equality. So they in order to keep inflation low and grow the economy, they do expansionary and contractionary policies. So expansionary policy attempts to reduce unemployment and stimulate output. So as we did in the booklet, what are some ways they can provide expansionary policy? So I'll ask Olivia, do you want to answer? What are some ways they can provide expansionary policy?
Could they like give money to businesses so then they would have more money to employ people?
Yes. Yeah, give money to businesses through subsidies to employ more people. So they do this a lot through grants. So that's exactly it. So grants for businesses, and this leads to economic growth. And the good thing about grants are that it is like an investment, because you usually get a higher societal return than the value of the grant. So that's usually what happens. So they may get, let's say, they may get double, like they may get $2 of value per $1 of grant in some cases. So like that can happen. So the value is calculated through societal benefits, like economic growth and other benefits. So like so they can put in cash benefits, cash and non-cash benefits. So they also throw in whatever's not cash related. So there's a lot of benefits we get that are not cash related, like improvements in public safety is a non-cash benefit. So they value it with dollar value just so they can show how much of a benefit a program has. So they do that. And also, yeah, public safety is a big one. Also the value of the education system. So the skills you achieve through school, a lot of those are valued at a non-cash basis. So there's a lot of, so they put a dollar value on it because it's very valuable to society and it benefits society a lot, even though you don't receive cash for it immediately. It just leads to a lot of benefits to society, and that's why they value it. They put a value on it usually. So yeah, so that's why schools are a big part of our nation, because there's a huge amount of non-monetary benefits, like non-cash benefits to going to school. So expansionary policies do a lot of that. So I just snapshotted that and put it in the chat so everyone can have further notes. And then the contractionary policy attempts to minimize inflation by reducing demand, so which can have the side effect of reducing output. So I'll ask the class here, what are the options that the government has to perform contractionary policy? So I'll ask Zachary. Do you want to answer, Zachary?
Sorry, I'm not too sure.
Oh, that's okay. So they can reduce government spending and increase taxes. So those are the two things they can do: reduce government spending and increase taxes. And they usually do this. So this can be used to reduce inflation and increase affordability. Also, so this happened. Also, they can do this to reduce deficits and debt. So they did this in the late 1990s in Canada and the US, and this reduced the the deficits per year, because this reduced this actually led to, so this led to spending being reduced and tax revenue was then greater than spending. So they were now saving, these governments were now saving money and reducing the national debt. So they can, so the two things you can do with contractionary fiscal policy are that, so you can do two things with this. So you can do that, so two things you can do with contractionary fiscal policy are that you can reduce inflation, so / increase affordability, and reduce the national debt. So those are two things they can do, that the country can do, and those are very beneficial things because there's less you have to pay back to other people through reducing the national debt, and also higher affordability. Having more affordability is good for us because we can purchase groceries at a reasonable price. We can purchase all our necessities at a reasonable price, and there's less of a problem with poverty if affordability is not a concern. If we can afford things, we're not going to have as much poverty. So it's a very important thing that we have to focus on. And contractionary fiscal policy is something we can do to increase affordability. So I'm just gonna snapshot this here and then put it in the chat so everyone has it. It's in chat. So let's get to our next slide here. So stabilizing the business cycle. So without stabilization policy, if the government doesn't, so this is when the government doesn't do anything. So this is when the government doesn't do anything. So here, to start here would be an expansion at this point to start. So I'll just use arrows to make it easier. So we'd start an expansion here. So that'd be expansion, and then this would be peak right here. So peak is the top of the business cycle, and then here's recession. So like negative economic growth. So that's recession, and then trough. So trough is like no economic growth. It's like it would be so like no economic growth. So neither positive or negative. So that's where trough would be, and then peak would be positive economic growth. And expansion would be so expansion would be positive economic growth here. And then peak would be no economic growth. It's neither positive or negative. So this is what would happen if there was no government, if government didn't come in, everything would adjust long term. So like everything, so like if we were in a recession today, over the long term, the economy would recover. So but it would be too slow. So that is why we have government intervening in our economy during recessions and troughs, because we want our economy to get back to reasonable growth faster than if we left it on its own. So it's really a speed game. So that's why the government intervenes, because it's a speed game. We want our economy to grow back to where it was faster. So the government speeds up the process and allows the economy to recover quicker. So that's why we have government, because we want to speed up the process. It's very important to speed it up, because we can't be in a recession for too long, or else so many people would be out of work. There would be too much unemployment, and people would be, losing their homes, losing a lot of their assets, and not being able to afford things because they're not working. So we need to speed up the process and get the economy back to growth faster, and that's why the government is here to allow that to happen. So that's why we have government. So I just pasted that, put it in the chat. So effective stabilization policy minimizes the severity of peaks and troughs in the business cycle. So it reduces the severity of the recession and expansion. So like in other words, recessions are less severe due to expansionary fiscal policy, and then expansionary inflation is lower due to contractionary fiscal policy. So contractionary fiscal policy improves affordability of goods and services. So fiscal policy is very important to just, iron out these issues here. So I'll put this in the chat here too. So as you can see here, with stabilization policy, everything's less severe. You see that the recession here, if you look at this arrow here, the recession is less steep. Like it gets down to here at its worst, which is not as bad as if you had no stabilization, if you had no fiscal policy. Also, affordability is better. So affordability is better here. Affordability is better under fiscal policy. And then also recessions are less severe with expansionary fiscal policy. So I'll add to the other here. So affordability is better under contractionary fiscal policy. So I wanted to add that just as. So yeah, so that's so it's very important for that. The differences between actual output and the long run trend of potential output are smaller. So reducing inflation, recessionary and inflationary gaps. So affordability is improved, and also the severity of recessions is lower. So that's key. So I'll add this into the chat for anyone who wants to download that image for their notes. And then here, stabilization policies B. So here, stabilization policy can take the form of either fiscal policy or monetary policy. So fiscal policy uses taxes and government purchases. Expansionary fiscal policy involves more government purchases and lower taxes shift aggregate demand rightward. So you need more government spending and lower taxes to shift aggregate demand right. And that would be also an increase in economic growth. So aggregate demands increasing is the same as an increase in economic growth. So yes, so that's that there. So put this in chat too. So contractionary fiscal policy involves less government purchases and increased taxes shift aggregate demand leftward. So yeah, that would be. So here, you need, so contractionary fiscal policy would be reduce government spending and increase taxes. Shift aggregate demand to the left. Aggregate demand decreasing is the same as a decrease in economic growth.
Sorry, I had a question. I was
Yes.
wondering, with contractionary fiscal policy, does it mean that unemployment will also gradually increase?
Yes, exactly. So that's yeah, good point there. That's why yeah, thanks for bringing that up, Alexandra. So unemployment would increase with contractionary fiscal policy. That is why that is one of the costs of contractionary fiscal policy. Can you think so Alexandra, can you think of other costs of contractionary fiscal policy?
I think a good example would probably be well, reduction in prices, obviously.
Yes.
Interest rate reduction as
Yes.
well. But when we're talking at the exchange rate, it may influence it and potentially also reduce it, but I'm not sure about this one. Because unemployment is increasing, so it can reduce the foreign exchange rate value.
Yes, so the exchange rate would decrease too. That's great. Yeah. Because because unemployment is going up. So that's great. Great job, Alexandra. So here, so they don't usually do this to so here they don't so here they don't so there's another thing they can do to there's another thing they can do to increase affordability. Let me know if if you can't hear me, so let me know if yeah, if you can hear me.
Yeah,
But
we can hear you.
oh, excellent, perfect. So so they don't usually do this actually, so they don't usually use fiscal policy to improve affordability. They could theoretically using these models here. But like Alexandra said, the unemployment will go up and economic growth will go down through contractionary fiscal policy. So that's the cost of it. So what they do instead is they use monetary policy to create affordability. So that's what they usually do because monetary policy has less costs in terms of unemployment and also yeah, less costs in terms of unemployment and reductions in economic growth. So what they did last year primarily to allow for improvements in affordability, they raised interest rates. So that's what they did there. So they raised interest rates and so they raised interest rates and reduced the money supply. So they did this to increase affordability. So this leads to less costs. So like so unemployment doesn't increase as much under this scenario. So that's why they use. So last year in 2022 with the inflation issues, they used monetary policy to solve it instead of fiscal policy. Theoretically you could use either or both, but the costs of fiscal policy are just too great. And yeah, so Alexandra brought up the good point of that. The cost of fiscal policy are just too great. And they saw a lot of that in the late 90s with using contractionary fiscal policy to bring down their debt. They saw a lot of these issues that we're raising here in terms of unemployment and lower economic growth because of their contractionary fiscal policy. So there's a lot of costs to it. And yeah, so there's a lot of costs to contractionary fiscal policy. So yeah, so I put that in the chat. I'm just gonna make sure that it's all in the chat. So I'll take a screenshot of everything here. So yeah, it's in the chat now. So you can download it for your notes in the chat. So monetary policy uses interest rates and the money supply. And that's the better way because there's less costs using monetary policy. So expansionary fiscal policy, we'll show you this. So it would shift aggregate demand to the right. So rising government purchases or cut in taxes increases aggregate demand, shifting the aggregate demand curve from 80 naught to 81. So this leads to a rise in the equilibrium price level and output rises to its potential level. So this is expansionary fiscal policy. So these are the results of what would happen here. Output is also the same as economic. So GDP. So output increasing is the same as economic growth. So in this case, like real GDP. So output increasing is the same as economic growth, and that is the same as real GDP increasing. So that's what happens with this is what happens with increased government spending and reduced taxes and expansionary fiscal policy. So that's what happens here. And then the price level increasing here. Price level increasing is the cost of expansionary fiscal policy. So under expansionary fiscal policy, the price level increases. There's no way around it, unfortunately. In a perfect world, we wouldn't have much higher price level. Like in a perfect world, we would keep. So in a perfect world, we would keep price level stable with real GDP growth. That would be the ideal scenario because affordability, because having affordability and economic growth would be perfect. However, the cost of economic growth is reduced affordability. That's really what the takeaway is. So the cost of economic growth is reduced affordability. So like that's always what happens. So if we have economic growth, we're going to have reduced affordability. There's no way around it, unfortunately. So we're going to have things are going to be more expensive. So yeah, so like products and services become more expensive as a result of economic growth. So that can become an issue when wages don't rise as fast as prices, which is usually the case, which is almost always the case. So wages take a very long time to adjust to increase when prices increase, which leads to affordability issues as seen last year in 2022. So that's the unfortunate that's the unfortunate part of our economy that happens. Yeah. So the government has to come in and intervene to adjust this. So contractionary fiscal policy. So here, a fall in government purchases or a rise in taxes decreases aggregate demand. So that shifts the aggregate demand curve from the left from 80 naught to 81. So this is a good strategy to reduce inflation and increase affordability. And also a good strategy to reduce the national debt. So contractionary fiscal policy is good for both those things there. And yeah, so it improves affordability and reduces national debt. That's why they do it. But but the costs of this are increased unemployment and reduced economic growth. So there are some major costs to this policy here. So I'll put this in the chat for everyone. So yeah, so based on the costs of contractionary fiscal policy, the government asks the like central bank to conduct monetary policy, to conduct contractionary monetary policy, to improve affordability, due to the reduced costs they incur. So that's really why the Bank of Canada does this is why the Bank of Canada does a lot of interest rate policies, because that's why you hear the Bank of Canada news a lot, because they conduct a lot of the affordability adjustments that we need in our economy. So let's do some active learnings here. So in each of the following cases, state what types of fiscal policy, if any, should be applied. So if real output is less than potential level, so what would they do in this situation? Does Ashley want to try?
Sure. So that means the economic growth is not as good as it should be.
Yes.
Okay. Increase economic growth. That one would be the expansionary fiscal policy.
Yes. Excellent job. Thanks, Ashley. That's great. Perfect. And then what would be the fiscal policy you would have to use for unemployment is below its natural rate?
So you would increase government spending. So I'm guessing also exponential fiscal policy.
Close. So in this case, it's kind of like in this case, it's kind of like golf. So the lower unemployment, the better.
Oh, okay.
So based on that, it's kind of like golf scores, like the lower the better. So based on that, what type of fiscal policy
Then
do you use?
you would use a contradictional, what's it called again?
Oh yes,
Yeah, that one.
yes, perfect. Contractionary fiscal policy, that's great.
Yeah.
Because affordability is likely a problem now, because
Mhm.
the flip side of lower unemployment is that prices are going up. So yeah, good job, Didier. That was great. So then the next one, great job so far, Ashley. Didier. One, our real output equals its potential level and unemployment is at its natural rate. What would be the fiscal policy for this situation?
Well, I think none, because it works fine.
Yes, exactly. That's perfect. Great job. Great job, all of you. That was great. So I'll for your notes, I'll put this into the chat here. Yeah, great job. It's in here. So then I'll show you the answers that they had. So real output is less than its potential level. Because real output is less than potential, an expansionary fiscal policy is called for, which means government purchases should be increased and slash or taxes decrease. And then this is also posted under the March 23rd materials, so you can access this also. Unemployment is below its natural rate. So since unemployment is below its natural rate, a contractionary fiscal policy should be used if there are signs of rising inflation. This means government purchases should be decreased and slash or taxes increased. Real output equals its potential level and unemployment is its natural rate. With the economy already at potential output and the corresponding natural rate of unemployment, there's no need for fiscal policy. So everyone, excellent answers. They lined up with what the PowerPoint had. So discretionary fiscal policy is intentional government intervention in the economy. So it has to be passed to the House of Commons. They have to pass the bill through the MPs in the House of Commons. There's about 338 roughly. So big thank you to Tracy for this observation, and thank you everyone for being great. And thank you, Tracy, for the observation.
Thank you so much. I learned an incredible amount,
Thanks.
and I love how you kept everything. I felt like I was able to keep everything in my brain as you put everything into the chat. Thank you, everyone. Thanks so much, Professor Johnson.
Thank you, Tracy, for coming in. Thank you, everyone. You're always a great class. I appreciate your professionalism and everything. So announcement, I moved the presentations to the March 30th. So yeah, presentations will be March 30th, and also you can submit the midterm report on March 30th. So I moved the Dropbox date to March 30th. So yeah, presentations will be March 30th for all groups, and then the midterm report we do March 30th. So automatic stabilizers are built-in measures such as taxes and transfer payments to lessen the effects of the business cycle. So a contracting economy decreases net tax revenues, which increases government spending and therefore business and personal incomes. So automatic stabilizers are important. So like employment insurance and welfare, employment insurance and welfare are the biggest ones. So what happened is employment insurance is a huge stabilizer. So what happens is during recessions, the money spent on employment insurance goes through the roof. So like because many people claim employment insurance because a lot of them are out of work. So it's a huge stabilizer. So they claim employment insurance because a lot of them are out of work. So yeah, so employment insurance is a very important program that increases economic growth from recessions. So that's a big one. So like if you look at a graph, so like look up a graph showing employment insurance over each year. So like look up a graph showing employment insurance over each year. You could show, like it shows you the amounts that are during recessions, expansions, etc. So I recommend, yeah, look that up on Google. It's pretty apparent. Like as you can see, if you look it up, I think I'll show one. It increases rapidly during recessions. It's so obvious when recessions happen because you see the increase it's very drastic increase. So an expanding economy increases net tax revenues, which decreases government spending and therefore business and personal incomes. I'm just gonna paste this and just put this in the chat for everyone here. That's in the chat for everyone. Magnified impact of one-time spending change in aggregate demand. So like I said with the grant, let's say providing a grant to a business. Let's say the business grant multiplier multipliers is 2. So for every dollar of the grants, $2 of value is created. So like you would multiply the value, the grants cost, the grants by the multiplier to get the benefits of the grants. So that's what you would do to figure out what the benefits of the grant are. And this process is repeated with each spending round smaller than the last. So think of it as a respending effect. So the multiplier effect. So each new spending round is determined by the marginal propensity to consume, which is the percentage of the increase of income that's spent on domestic consumption. So each new spending round is also determined by the marginal propensity to withdraw, MPW, which is the percentage of the increase in income that's withdrawn from current domestic circulation. So the MPC and MPW always sum up to 100% the increase in income. So the spending multiplier, it's the value by which an initial spending change is multiplied to give the total shift of the ADU curve. So it equals 1 divided by MPW. So the actual change in equilibrium, real output is less than the change in aggregate demand found using the spending multiplier, because the prices usually increase when there's a large increase in demand. Some of that extra spending is absorbed by higher prices rather than extra output of goods and services. So multiplier effect. The MPC is defined as a change in consumption on domestic products as a proportional change in income. MPC equals change in consumption on domestic items divided by change in income. So MPW is defined as a change in total withdrawals as a proportion of the change in income. So MPW equals change in total withdrawals over change in income. So if you add those two up, the MPC and MPW, you get 1. The multiplier is 1 divided by 1 minus MPC, or 1 divided by MPW. This won't be tested on, it's just more on like, so this is like, so this is not tested on. It is just showing the mechanics of the ideas we talk about. So yeah, none of this is tested on. It's just more like just to understand where a lot of what we talk about comes from. And as like you go deeper into economics, like you'll learn more of this. So in this case, suppose income rises by $1,000 and the consumer spends $800 in domestic products, uses the rest of the savings, taxes, and imports. What's the MPC in this case? Does Malika want to try doing this one?
So you would take 800 and divide it by 1,000
Yes.
to get 0.8.
Yes. Great job, Malika. That was great. And then what's the MPW in this case? Does Olivia want to try this one?
Yeah, so it'd be 1 minus 0.8, which is 0.2.
Yes, excellent job. And then what's the spending multiplier? Does Zachary want to try this one?
Sorry, my mic wasn't connected. 1 over 0.2, so it should be 5, I think.
Excellent. Great job. Great job, Zachary. Yeah, excellent. Great work. Yeah, so that's all, it's all correct. I'm just gonna take a screenshot and put this in the chat for one. So here you go. So yeah, it's all correct. Yeah, it matches up with what they had in the answers. So great job, everyone. So yeah, the multiplier shows what the return on investment will be. So let's say the multiplier is 6 and sorry, 5 is 5 in this case. So in this case, if you invest, let's say $1,000 into this, 1,000 times 5 equals $5,000. So that's the total benefits of the investment. So the multiplier shows the return, like the return on investment, basically. So it's a really beneficial number. Like governments use multipliers to determine what programs to provide to the public. So like if you end up working for the government, you may have to create multipliers for, let's say, like healthcare spending. So like spending on vaccines would have a multiplier. So there would be a multiplier for spending on vaccines. Spending on, yeah, so that they would have multipliers on all types of healthcare spending. So yeah, so multipliers, they determine what types of healthcare spending have the highest multiplier, and they make decisions based on the multiplier being one of the criterions. So like multiplier and a few other metrics are used. So yeah, so they use other metrics, like it's not just multiplier, there's other ones, but yeah. So if an economy is initially in equilibrium and injections rise by $1 million, by how much would all withdrawals have to rise to bring injections and withdrawals back into balance? So in that case, I'll ask, does Alexandra want to try that one?
Sure. So we're initially in equilibrium, and how much withdrawals have to rise to bring injections? Okay. I think that, do we have to calculate it with a previous formula as well?
I don't, for this case, I don't think you have to. I think just using like I think A and B, I think.
Okay.
the information from there. Try your best, don't worry. It's yeah, don't worry. Just try your best.
Okay, sounds good. Because I'm not sure about this one.
Yeah,
Um,
it's kind of tricky. Yeah, just take a just
It's- if the
Uh,
withdrawals are MPWs 0.67, so maybe it's 670,000.
yes, that seems, yeah, exactly. Great job. So 1 million times 0.67, 670,000. Great job. Yeah, so that's great. And then great job, Alexandra. And then let's see that. So I think you're right if that applied to A. So it's a good assumption that it would apply to A, because yeah, so like it's a good assumption you had. So I would say you're right, like just because B should apply to A also. Um So then the next one, yeah, like so if the MPW is same both, which it should be, you're right. And then here the incomes and output must rise by 1.5 million. 1 divided by 0.67 is 1.5 spending multiplier. Yeah. So that's that question. Good job, Alexandra on A. Just send this over in the chat here. So yeah. So then impact of higher government purchases. So in this case, on the left, $1,000 rise in government purchases gradually pushes up real output by $2,000, assuming an MPC of 50%. So each round of spending adds successfully to smaller amounts. So yeah, this is how output will increase over time due to higher government purchases. Then on the right, each successive amount of spending involves a greater amount of total withdrawals until new withdrawals equal the equalized spend. So here, if with a spending multiplier of 1.5, if there's a $20 billion rise in government purchases, output will rise by 30 billion. So to get that, you would do 20 billion times 1.5, and you get 30 billion. That's usually like, that would be like infrastructure. So infrastructure like roads, bridges, buildings, etc. If you spent 20 billion on infrastructure, the spending, it would produce 30 billion in benefits likely, because this is the like this is close to the multiplier for infrastructure. So that's what would happen in this case. For yeah, that'd be close to the multiplier for infrastructure. So put this in the chat here for everyone. So then fiscal policy has two main benefits. It can be focused on particular regions or groups that need assistance the most. So that's a good point. Has a relatively direct impact on spending. Fiscal policy has three main drawbacks. There's a lot of delays, so it takes a long time for it to provide benefits. It's politically visible, so if you're doing it, like if you're supporting a certain group, let's say there's a lot of cases where like the government is spending more money on, let's say, political donors, like people that might be or are political donors. That's a big problem. So like if you're giving grants to businesses that supported your campaign, that's a big problem. So they're talking about like that. Also, like yeah, anything related to lobbyists, if you're giving contracts to your friends, that kind of thing, that can be an issue. So that does happen in politics a lot. Like it's always happened, it will always happen. It's just that's the problem with fiscal policy. Government spending goes to people that are like friends in a lot of cases, like people that were on campaign, etc. And it's closely related to public debt, the amount owed by the federal government. So it adds on to the debt. So if you spend more, it adds on the debt. Lower taxes, there's less to pay off the debt. The impact of fiscal policy. So government is running a balanced budget when its expenditures and revenues are equal. Budget surplus when its revenues exceeds expenditures. Budget deficit when its expenditures exceeds revenues. So I'll put this in the chat. So yeah, so balanced budget when its expenditures and revenues are equal. Budget surplus when its revenues exceeds expenditures. Budget deficit when its expenditures exceeds revenues. The impact of fiscal policy. So when a government has a budget deficit, its debt increases by the same amount. Budget surplus, its debt decreases by the same amount. In the past, the federal government tended to run budget deficits. Because of past borrowing, the federal government pays large public debt interest charges. So yeah, so there's a lot of debt. So Canada has a debt of around 1.5 trillion. Half of it is through stimulus from COVID-19. So they increased spending and reduced taxes during COVID-19, and their debt doubled, more than doubled. So that's what happens, more than doubled. So that's what happens. But they did need this spending and lower taxes because the economy, because a lot of the parts of the economy were shut down, and economic output went down by record amounts in the first few months of the pandemic. So they needed this output. They needed this, but the cost of this was higher. So like the cost of the expansionary fiscal policy was the increase in the debt and very high inflation. So those were the costs of what they did, but they needed it. Like, even though there was high inflation and higher debt, they needed this though. They needed this to happen. They needed the expansionary fiscal policy because they were just, the economy just needed it badly during that time. So fiscal policy guidelines. So there are three main approaches that can guide government fiscal policy. Annually balanced budget. So balancing budgets each year is a good idea. Also cyclically balanced budgets. So yeah, annually balanced budgets where spending equals taxes. Cyclically balanced budgets. So yeah, with that, there is no debt due to the recession. So that's really what you want from that. And then, so allow deficits during recessions if accumulated debt is paid off during subsequent expansions. So if they can pay the debt off, then debt's fine during recessions. You just have to be able to pay the debt off. So in this case, they can borrow during recessions only if they pay their debt back during recessions, during expansion, sorry. So that's what is needed. Then functional finance, budgets designed to stabilize the present economy, irrespective of the surplus or deficit it creates over the long term. So yeah, that's key there. So put this in here too. Recent fiscal policy in Canada. This has been moved from functional finance towards cyclically balanced budgets. Total government deficits were highest during the early 1980s and 1990s. 1980s deficits were like largely discretionary, but the 1990s deficits were related to automatic stabilizers. So the budget surpluses in the late 1990s and early 2000s were due to automatic stabilizers, lower interest rates, and discretionary government spending cuts. So the key economic stabilizers are tax revenue, employment insurance, welfare. So here, employment insurance claims go up during recessions, thereby supporting people who lost their jobs. Welfare, people claim welfare during recessions because they lost their jobs. Also tax revenue. Tax revenue goes down in recessions. So people pay less tax when they lose their jobs or their income goes down. So that's people pay less tax when their income goes down due to our progressive tax system, which supports these people due to lower taxes during recessions. So they have to pay, so they pay less in taxes. They pay less in taxes during these periods, which supports them during recessions. So I'll post this too into the chat. So here, yeah, the during this period, as you can see here, this is when there was budget surpluses. So the tax revenue was greater than government spending. So that was really the only period in Canada's like, in the last 40 years of Canada that we actually had tax revenue greater than spending. And then here government spending is greater than tax revenue. And then also here. So like so this was a recession. This was mostly expansionary period. Then this was like, yeah, so those were, and then anything before that was either recession or expansion. So the combined budget balances for the federal, provincial, and territorial governments are shown as percentage of Canada's nominal GDP. Recessions in the early 1980s and early 1990s each caused an increase in combined budget deficits. During the long economic expansion in the 1990s, these deficits gradually declined and led to combined surplus, only to return to deficit in the aftermath of the 2008-2009 recession. So this is very similar to the graph previously. Surpluses during the late 90s, early mid 2000s, and then deficits again 2008, 2009, 2010, and so on, and then deficits before mid 1990s. In Canada's national debt, it's increased over time. It went down during the 90s here and up to the late 2000s, went up again. Now it's more than double in 2015. And then Canadian and US government gross debt to GDP, it's all increased over time. So it's all they increase mostly in the same pace in this case. And then Canadian and US government net debt to GDP, US it's a lot higher in terms of a percentage. So Canada is pretty low in this case compared to the US's percentage of net debt to GDP. So this would be calculated as debt divided by GDP. That's how you get that there. So it's debt divided by GDP, and that's why it's so much different than the total. So it's adjusted for GDP. So in the US, they have more of a debt issue in terms of that than we do. So I think we'll take a 10-minute break, but great class so far, everyone. Thanks everyone for your great participation. We'll take a 10-minute break. We'll continue on this topic, but great work everyone so far. So 10-minute break. The debt divided by GDP is higher in the US than Canada. So that's what this graph shows. So like the US has a lower lower tax base to tax their way out of their debt. So that's what happened here. So I'll share this with everyone here. So we're in a better state in this case because we have enough ways to tax to get us out of debt. It's debate over public debt. Those who support public debt say public debt provides benefits by reducing the cost of unemployment. About 80% of federal debt is held by Canadians or owed to ourselves. When debt is used to create productive assets is not necessarily a problem. There may have been times in the past where public debt as a percentage of GDP was higher than now. So those are their arguments about why they are fine with public debt. And like they're pretty good arguments, I would say, but there's a lot of drawbacks to public debt also. So I think public debt, so my view of public debt can be good to grow our economy. Also, public debt is mostly owed to ourselves through the central bank printing money and lending it to the government. But there's a lot of issues with it outside of that. So public debt charges rose until recently. Provincial and territorial debts need to be taken into account as well. There are limits on how much taxes can be raised to pay public debt charges. And there are potential future burdens associated with the crowding out effect and the amount of Canada's debt held by foreigners. So printing money to pay out off debt can cause inflation. So these are also a lot of good reasons why we shouldn't have a high public debt. So there's good and bad reasons for both. So so you hear like they have good arguments for both sides here. So these are really good arguments for both sides. And you need to weigh both sides and make a decision. There are pros and cons of each side. So like one side is not perfect over another. So like you need to question this and determine what the best course of action is. So like questioning is key. So that's very important. So question everything here. So question everything about public debt, pros and cons. So active learning. So a government has an outstanding debt of 100 billion. If in a given year the government spends $10 billion and brings in 15 billion in taxes, then what is the government's budget deficit or surplus, and what happens to its debt? So does Ashley want to try this one?
So their surplus is 5 billion,
Yes.
and then they ideally would put that towards their debt, and then it would be reduced by that $5 billion.
Yes. Yes. Good job. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, good job. Good job, Ashley. That was great. And then if instead the government's expenditures are at 12.5 billion and its tax revenues are 10 billion, then what is the government's budget deficit or surplus, and what happens to their debt? Does Didier want to try this one?
So the 2.5 billion would be the, what's it called, the surplus. So it would be 100 billion plus 2.5.
Close. So it'll be deficit of 2.5 billion.
Oh, definitely. Yeah.
Yeah. So close. So it'd be deficit of 2.5 billion, and then the debt would rise by 2.5 billion. But yeah, good try, Didier. And then a federal government budget surplus is associated with what? Does Malika want to try this one?
Sorry, there's just too many words. Like,
Oh, it's okay. It's okay.
would it be C? I'm not.
Close. It'll be tax revenues larger than government spending and used to combat inflation.
Oh, it would be D.
Yeah, so tax revenues.
Oh, okay. I just got the first part right, just not the other.
Yeah, you got the first part. Yeah, good job on getting. Yeah, you got the first sentence. That was great. So yeah, it was like half right. So that a great job on that. So yeah, good job on the tax revenues greater than government spending. So I'll put this in the chat here. So yeah, good job, Malika. And then active learning. Consider the economic statistics in the chart below. What is the main economic problem shown by these statistics in 2019? Does Olivia want to try this one?
Inflation's really high.
Yes, exactly. That's the problem with low unemployment. So the problem with so this is exactly what happens with low unemployment rates. Inflation is high. So this is exactly what happens. So yeah, good point on that. That was great. So yeah, that's the cost of low unemployment, inflation. So yeah, good job on that. Inflation is becoming a large problem. Aggregate demand is higher than aggregate supply, causing upward pressure on prices of inflation. So describe appropriate fiscal policy for the federal government's Department of Finance to implement under the economic conditions described above. So Olivia, do you want to try that one too?
Would it be the contraction fiscal policy because they want to reduce inflation?
Yes. Good job. Yeah. Excellent. Great work. And then, so briefly explain how a budget deficit arises and how it can be funded. So does Zachary want to try this one?
I'm not too sure, but I know it has to do with the government spending more than they're making.
Yes, yeah, exactly. So yeah, so budget deficit is when government spending is higher than tax. That's great. Thanks, Zachary. And then I'll ask Alexandra, how can a budget deficit be funded?
I think increasing taxation would be one of the ways to solve it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Excellent. Yeah, that's a great way. That's the ideal way. So there's no debt. So that's great, Alexandra. And Ashley, can you think of any other ways the budget deficit can be funded?
If they would spend less, that would help. So maybe just readjusting what they focus their budget on.
Yes, exactly. So like cut government programs, that's something that they do. That's a good reason. And then did your how can a budget deficit be funded?
Could you print more money?
Yes.
So technically increase in monetary policy, right?
Yes, exactly. Yeah, that's a good point. So budget deficit can be funded through increase in monetary policy. So yeah, good job, Alexander. Yeah, that and Didier, great job, Didier. So yeah, this is what like this is what they've done for a long time. This is what they have done for a long time. Low interest rates. So low interest rates, increases in the money supply, higher debt, and they are borrowing this money from the central bank because the central bank is increasing the money supply. So that's a big reason there. And then Malika, can you think of any other ways they can fund the budget deficit?
Um, I don't know.
Well, it's okay. We kind of got all the ways. There's probably a lot more, but we got the main ways here. So I'll put this in the chat. Wait, these
Is
are the
there
main.
also a way to do like contractionary policy towards government spendings only, or something like that?
Yeah, they so like that's a good point. So maybe they have a budget deficit last year of, let's say, 5 billion. So then they do contractionary fiscal policy this year where their tax revenue is 5 billion higher than government spending. Then they use that 5 billion extra to pay off the deficit from last year. So that, yeah, that's a good point, Alexandra. So like, yeah, so they just use the 5 billion surplus from this year to pay off the deficit last year. So that's a good point. Yeah, so they can do that. Yeah, Alberta did that a lot. Alberta did that a lot pre 2015. So yeah, great brainstorming on that. Like, yeah, great brainstorming. So then they have some. So I want to make sure that's I put this in. I'll just copy again so everyone has it just in case. So they spending exceeds tax revenue, that's deficit. And then funding borrowing capital markets, just like corporations, or from central bank. Most countries did this in 2009, print money. So yeah, we got a lot of those reasons. And then same result, government borrows for free and money supply increases. So like the problem, so the central bank is officially separate from the government, but unofficially they are basically the same. But on paper they are separate. So like the government doesn't really have to worry about paying them back. So the government basically can this is basically what can happen. The government can basically can never if they choose, the government can choose to never pay back the loans that they make from the central bank. So Bank of Canada and Canada, or the Federal Reserve in the United States, and just pay the interest rate on the debt. So, and never pay it completely back. So and the interest rates up until recently was almost 0%. So it was about 0.75% in Canada, which is so low that it is basically nothing. Because it is like, it's basically nothing compared. So so they are basically getting this money for free. So like that's the benefit of just printing money. And they can just like, they don't have to, there's no but there is there is a drawback to this through the currency going down in value. That's the main drawback of that. But there's a lot of other drawbacks that it's like, I'll ask the class, what are other drawbacks to the government just borrowing money from their central bank?
I think it actually gives the government opportunity to spend more money and do not track their spendings as carefully. So sometimes it turns out to be unnecessary spendings, and a lot of times it leads to fraud and money laundering. And I don't know. That's
yeah.
my.
That's great. Yeah, exactly, Alexandra. Yeah. Fraud, unnecessary spending, programs that don't work. Like embezzlement is something that does happen. Embezzlement, so they take money.
I think a good example will be when teenagers do not get money from their parents, but they borrow it and pay it back. So they learn the value of money. So a lot of times government actually loses the actual value of money because they know that they're not as responsible for it.
I was just thinking that's a great example they're setting for all of their citizens. Like, I wish my interest rates were that low on my student loans. But
Everything.
Yeah, it's a very yeah, the government can basically, it's like the US, at least the US government can borrow limitless money basically, because their cost of borrowing is virtually nothing. So like, yeah, so that's a big problem the US has. Yeah, and like it's exactly, it's a bad example it sets for young people, because when we borrow, we have costs to it. There's a cost to borrowing we have, but the government doesn't. Yeah, it's a good point. It's a bad example for like people like us and anyone that's not a part of the government.
But if the currency loses its value, doesn't it like affect the economy overall of the country?
Yes.
Or like their power to?
Yes, exactly. So we can't, with that, when we borrow way too much from the central bank and print so much money, we won't be able to import anything eventually. So like, if we had hundreds of trillions of dollars that were printed in the Bank of Canada, our currency would be like, I'd say like, yeah, hundreds of trillions, thousands of trillions, our currency would be worthless. And then we'd have to do everything within our borders, because no one, because we could never buy anything from anybody else anymore.
So does the US do this because the dollar is like the most powerful currency out of all of them?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, you got it. Like, you hit it on the nail. Since the US dollar is so strong, they can get away with this.
Okay. So it would be better to borrow from capital markets than actual borrowing from your central bank if you're not planning to give it back. Like, which one would it be better for?
Good question. Borrowing from the capital markets is probably better to keep your currency strong. Yeah, it's probably a better way. but they have to pay they have to pay real interest if they're gonna borrow, and they have to pay back the people when they borrow from capital markets, which is not really their thing. Like they don't really like that. They like when there's no consequences to borrowing.
Okay.
So it's a really yeah, the US gets away with it because their currency is so strong that they can get away with it. But if their currency wasn't the strongest in the world, they wouldn't be able to get away with it. Canada, we have a pretty strong currency in Canada, but it's not nearly as strong as the US.
Yeah.
We could never get away with the level of borrowing that they do because we would our currency would not, we just don't have the value they have to do it. But yeah, it's
Okay, makes sense.
yeah, it's a good discussion because yeah, there's a lot of the government, at least the governments in Canada and the US, they like, it doesn't matter what party is in power, they like to borrow from the central bank. It doesn't matter what party it is, they're all the same. Like, it's just they all want to borrow from the central bank. Yeah, and yeah, but like Europe doesn't have that option because they all share a currency, and they really have to, they can't just borrow from their central bank. It's very hard because they share a central bank across many countries.
Oh, so they have like a high interest rate between them then.
Yeah, and then they have to borrow from capital markets more often over there.
Oh, okay. Oh, okay.
And it keeps them more honest, I find, because they don't have to just like print money to,
Yeah.
finance everything. So it's but yeah, great discussion on that, everyone. That's great. So then contrast government debt with budget deficit surplus. So the debt is how much the government's borrowed over time. Budget deficit surplus is how much has been borrowed or paid back in one particular year. So what are some practical difficulties of discretionary fiscal policy?
Maybe that because of contraction, like taking the money out and not letting it in the flow, over time it results in more unemployment.
Yes, exactly. That's great, Alexandra. So yeah, expansionary fiscal policy can crowd out business, consumer borrowers, and raise interest rates. Tends to reduce the expansionary impact of the policy. There are long and variable time lags in active fiscal policy and waiting for it to have an effect. The impact of temporary fiscal policy is smaller than the impact of permanent fiscal policy. It may be hard to persuade politicians of the merits of counter-cyclical fiscal policy, especially when it requires surplus. So yeah, there's yeah, it's there's a lot of difficulties in this.